Hello and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about the recently released books. Welcome back again. This is Ray Walters. Some books are written to explain an idea. Others are written to preserve a history. Faith of Our Fathers, Mission and Message of the Cherubim and Seraphim is a detailed work of religious history, organizational memory, and personal heritage. The book gathers historical background, names, dates, institutional developments, and teaching materials connected to the Cherubim and Seraphim tradition. This also places that story within a wider discussion of church history, Bible translation, missionary activity in Africa, and the development of African religious movements. In this conversation, we will focus on the book as a written work, why it was compiled, how the material was researched and organized, what challenges came with preserving this history, and why written records matter for future generations. Our guest is a member of the Cherubim and Seraphim and serves as the overseas training coordinator of the Training and Capacity Development Directorate of the Eternal Sacred Order of the Cherubim and Seraphim. He is also a practicing board-certified physician based in Los Angeles with a background in medical research, teaching, and published work in hypertension and kidney disease. He is the author of Faith of Our Fathers, Mission and Message of the Cherubim and Seraphim, Dr. David Martins. Doctor, welcome to the Author Roundup.
Thank you so much, Ray. Nice to meet you and welcome everybody.
All right, Doctor, first off, congratulations in getting this book published. How has it been since this came out?
Oh, it just came out last year,
Mm-hmm.
very early.
How has it been? Like any reviews so far, feedback you've received?
I've got a lot of feedback from many members of the church, and everybody kind of likes it because it represents a first-time written account of the elements that are important for the preservation of these traditions and practices of the church, to the next generation.
All right. Dr. Martins, I'm not going to delay this anymore. Let me go ahead and ask you the first question. For our viewers and listeners who are new to your work, tell us about Faith of Our Fathers, Mission and Message of the Cherubim and Seraphim. What is the book about, and who did you write it for?
As a matter of fact, I wrote the book because of the problems I encountered as a clinician in Los Angeles. And I realized that it is extremely important for people to understand that faith actually matters in health and wellness in society at large. And looking back at my upbringing in the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, I realized that there are some lessons that I can actually teach my patients, because there is a lot of opinions on what faith is and how do we live out faith in communities and society. So I really wrote this book as a lesson for communities at large, religious and non-religious community, and from the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, because I believe there are lessons that are valuable for society at large from the Cherubim and Seraphim Church.
All right. This book appears to be both personal and historical. What first moved you to take on a project that preserves the history and identity of the Cherubim and Seraphim movement?
Yeah, because the Cherubim and Seraphim movement is a very interesting movement in the sense that it was born out of necessity. And when I look all over the world at communities of faith, there are very differing opinions on the relationship that truly matters. Like, for instance, there is no illusion about this. If you really want health, you have to promote holiness, you know, and if you really want social well being, you have to promote spirituality. You're not going to get true health without holiness, and you're not going to get true social well being without elements of spirituality. So, this really is what I see in communities, and the fact that people did not really know how to live. It seemed to me like people have forgotten how to be a human being. You know, it is difficult to be human without being humane. And all of these are rooted in our understanding of faith and the essence of faith. That really is my motivation for writing the book.
Thank you, Doctor. Your professional background is in medicine, research, and teaching. How did that background shape the way you organized, documented, and presented this material?
Yeah, for about 2 decades, I was very active in health disparity research, very familiar with doing literature searches and reviewing. And one thing I'm very good at is actually simplifying very complicated subject matters, right?
Mm.
And I brought that expertise into the writing of this book because I think it is extremely important for the common man and woman out there to understand that faith matters. We all need faith if we're going to live a life that is rewarding and reach our full destinies.
Your book opens with a broad overview of church history before narrowing into African religious history and the Cherubim and Seraphim movement. Why did you feel that larger historical foundation was necessary?
Yeah, many people uh, don't understand that the Cherubim and Seraphim church was actually born out of necessity. You see, this was not a movement that was born because a bunch of people decided to start a church. No, the church was born out of necessity. And that necessity was actually nested within the African experience of Western evangelistic effort. You see, like we always say, you know, we have a sociologist by name Ali Mazrui who said that when in his words, and I'm quoting, he said, when white men came to Africa, they had the Bible, we had the land, and they asked us to pray, and we closed our eyes and we prayed. And when we finished praying, we had the Bible, he had the land. You see, there is a lot of experience that we had with our effort to understand Christianity as Africans that are not as common knowledge as they need to be, you know. And one of the reasons I actually wrote the book is to make sure that we don't keep re-traumatizing ourselves
Mhm.
by not paying attention to some of the things that our ancestors suffered and went through, right? Some
Mhm.
British statement said, if you don't, those who are not familiar with history are doomed to repeating it, you know? And like I wrote in the book, human behavior is 30 to 60% genetically determined. And unless people are truly born again, they are likely to perpetrate their ancestral atrocities on unsuspecting future generations. So that really is the reason that I feel strongly that it's important to discuss the Cherubim and Seraphim Church within the broader context of the church, of to understand that this Cherubim and Seraphim was born out of necessities. And I'm sure we'll have opportunities to delve a little bit deeper into those nuances.
All right. What were some of the most important sources, records, or memories you had to consult while you were preparing the book?
Of course, I had to start with the Bible, right? And then we have a lot of historical documents on early Christian history and the spread of Christianity from Jerusalem worldwide. I referred to a lot of material from the Coptic Church in Egypt, right?
Mm.
And read a lot about the Christianity in Ethiopia. And as far as the Cherubim and Seraphim were concerned, I reference Aki Omoyajowo, a very prominent historian in Nigeria, and one of the elders of the church, Olufemi Famodimu, right, from the Cherubim and Seraphim Church as well, and the Eternal Sacred Order of the Cherubim and Seraphim actually published a book a couple of years ago on the history of the church. And into this book went also more than 48 hours of interviews with elders of the church over 2 years, more than a dozen elders of the church of Cherubim and Seraphim worldwide on information that are important to be included in the book.
Okay. I also noticed that the book discusses the tension between Western missionary influence and African religious identity. How did that tension shape the rise of movements like the Cherubim and Seraphim? I know you've touched on this on a little background about white missionaries in Africa. Can you let's now move into the movement. How did that tension shape the rise of the Cherubim and Seraphim?
You know, that is a very interesting question, Ray. I like to turn that question on its head because it's a lot easier to talk about how the rise of the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, right, shaped
Mm.
Christian thoughts and worship. You know, let's talk about the Christian thought. You see, in Africa, we always try to make things simple for the people to understand, right? So Christianity was a religion, but big and very complicated because by the time Christianity got to Africa, we already had the Catholic, we had the Protestants with their own peculiarities, and people needed to really understand what is the essence of Christianity, right? And the Cherubim and Seraphim elders actually put it all into three basic bins, right? One is the priesthood of the believer. You know, the thought, the idea that every Christian is actually a priest, right? You represent God. We are all agents of God. That thought is very unique, right? And then the presence of the Holy Spirit, which is that the Holy Spirit, God Himself, is in each and every one of us. If we carry ourselves with this understanding, it will definitely influence the way we conduct ourselves and our character. And then finally, the practice of holiness. Christianity is not about talk, it's also about walk. You have to talk the talk and walk the walk, you know? And that communal sense kind of understanding is also important for us to hold ourselves accountable as people of faith. That idea of the priesthood of the believer, the practice of holiness, and the presence of the Holy Spirit are three basic ideas that actually uphold the practice of the eternal sacred order of the cherubim and seraphim. Now, let's talk about worship. From the Jewish tradition and the Old Testament, we knew about dancing and drumming, using musical instruments in worship, right? But you will understand, and I don't know if you remember, when Christianity was adopted as a Roman religion, the use of musical instruments in worship was actually suppressed and banned, right? And that prohibition went on to even the Reformation era. A lot of what we do in churches today drumming, clapping, dancing were initiated among the Cherubim and Seraphim during the Pentecostal movement. Because the Cherubim and Seraphim is actually the first Pentecostal church in Africa, right? And today we're clapping and dancing and having visions and having prophets and prophecies in churches. All of this did not exist before the Cherubim and Seraphim, right, with the uprising of the Pentecostal movement. That is why it is extremely important, right, to talk about how Western influence shaped Christianity and how the fathers of Cherubim and Seraphim had to rediscover Christianity for the people in Africa, especially south of the Sahara. Because we remember that the Coptic church existed for thousands of years before the Roman church, right? And the Ethiopian church likewise. And many of the churches in north of Africa, in Ethiopia and Egypt, they kept to the ancient traditions of the church. So it took more than 1,500 years for the Africans south of the Sahara to rediscover and embrace those ancient Christian traditions and cultures so that the face of Christianity can look similar across the continent of Africa. That is why it is important to make sure that we preserve this journey of Christianity in Africa for the future generations.
Thank you, Doctor. My next question is, in writing about a movement that has deep meaning for many people, how did you balance respect for your heritage with the need to document events clearly and responsibly?
Yeah, that is very, very important question. What I find out is that people have convictions on what they believe that actually happened and how it happened. And many times, even when there are slight inaccuracies or inconsistencies in those convictions, they don't willingly give them up, right? So I had to rely on verification and validation of claims and convictions with historical records and accounts. And when things are far apart, go back and ask the elders, this is what you said, this is what the records reflect, and try to see whether we can actually come to a common ground for the understanding of an average person who may not have a dog in this fight, right? Just to be sure that we work to prevent bias in the historical account that we present in the book.
Doctor, let's now talk about a little bit about your experience in writing this book. So, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced while turning training materials, historical memory, and church identity into a readable book?
Yeah, that is a very good question because when you're looking at training material, usually you're given a topic to train on, and then you go in there with the learning objectives and you deliver the training and the lecture according to that objective for that particular training session. But when you're converting these into a book, now you have to talk about timelines and you're dealing with more complex issues. It was very inundating and not easy at all, but it was a good experience because I had the resources and people and independent sources to help me put those concepts and contents into specific timelines that can be validated and cross-validated by independent sources. That was indeed challenging, yes.
Doctor, the book also covers leadership, membership, service, orderliness, and community life. What do you hope readers understand about how movements preserve structure across generations?
Yeah, the Cherubim and Seraphim Church actually celebrated its 100 years in 2025, which was last year. And they've actually done a very good job preserving the essence, the mission and the message of the church over time. One thing that is important and that we have learned is that it is important to balance institutional wisdom and established core values of our elders with the energy and the need for innovation of the younger generation,
Mm,
And in the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, we have a mnemonym called traction that we use to keep ourselves together. Traction, TRACTION, where the
mm,
first T is actually trust, right? You establish trust, you make sure that we establish trust across generation, right? And then the R is result. We are all interested in the outcome. We're all
mm,
result oriented and we commit ourselves to accountability, right? You are to hold me accountable. I'm to hold you accountable, regardless of our age and gender, in light of the result that we're trying to achieve, right? And then we have to be committed, right? We have to commit our time and resources to this effort, right? But more importantly, we have to be truthful, right? And we promote integrity. And the O there is actually openness, being open. The
mm,
elders have to be open to the ideas that these younger generations might have and how they might want to preserve and practice the same values, but within their own context and in their own way. So I
mm.
really believe. And then the last one is to be neutral, both financially and materially, to the operation in the church. Because in the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, there are no paid priesthood, right? Everybody is a priest. So nobody is paid. We all do this together as the work of God, right? And it's extremely important, therefore, for everybody to be financially and materially neutral to the operations of the church. Nobody can gain, nobody can lose excessively into the operation. Everybody remains neutral. But the key thing, the reason I mentioned traction, is to talk about the importance of openness in the preservation of structure across generations in the church.
Dr. Martins, when writing about history, authors often have to decide what to include, what to summarize, and what to leave for readers to study further. In your part, how did you make those decisions?
As much as possible, I tried not to reinvent the wheel, right?
Mm,
If the historical account is fully established and well documented, we just referenced it, right? Now, if it is related and relevant to the subject of the book, we delve a little deeper into it to make sure that people understand what how this fits within the broad context of the subject, right? So that decision was not very difficult because
mm,
being in research and having done literature review and done reviews and published reviews in medical literature myself, it is easy to identify, okay, no, this is important, this is already well established, just
mm.
reference it. But if it has direct relevance to the subject matter in the book, then we'll delve deeper and show how that relates to what we're talking about in the book.
Thank you so much, Doctor. My next question is, what do you hope younger readers, especially those connected to the Cherubim and Seraphim Church, take away from this book about memory, responsibility, and preserving history?
Yeah, the Cherubim and Seraphim Church is gone global, and now we have children all over the world. We have children in North America, we have children in Europe, we have children in Africa. In order for us to preserve the doctrine and the practice of the church, it's got to be documented somehow, somewhere, for these children all over the world to have access so they can familiarize themselves with it and engage in conversation intelligently, knowledgeable about the truth and what the church really stood for and what the fathers put together so that we can preserve the doctrine and the practice of the church for posterity. The book is actually, a lot of books have been written, like I said earlier, but this is the first hand account that took that history of the church and planted it within the broader concept of the global church with historical account and timelines that makes things make sense. So that when a cherubim and seraphim child is talking to a Jewish kid, they understand in terms of relationship where cherubim and seraphim and Jewish history begins and where they meet and where they parted, right? That is extremely important. If a cherubim and seraphim child is talking to a Roman Catholic kid, he understands what the relationship is, understanding that the whole point is that we are all people of faith. We have nuances, differences here and there, but at the end of the day, the core concepts of faith is the same across those religions.
Dr. Martins, I am about to close this discussion, and I want to ask you this question. Um, Looking back on the completed book, what did the writing process teach you about history, heritage, and the responsibility of passing a message to the next generation? And of course, where can readers find the book or learn more about your work?
Yeah, writing the book really taught me that history is not as concise as you like to see it. Like someone told me, history is his story. In other
Hmm.
words, it's the way you see it from where you sit, right? So I realized that in compilation of material and interviews for this book, and I had to do a lot of validation and cross-validation of information by comparing them across multiple independent sources, right, including archives, archaeology, eyewitness account to make sure that what we are presenting in the book is the facts, right? Because people have different versions and perspective of the same event, right? On how they see it. And the greatest challenge was actually to present it as free as possible from bias.
Where can we grab a copy of your work, Dr.
Oh, the book
Martins?
is available everywhere book is sold. Ex Libris, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, everywhere book is sold, you can get Faith of Our Fathers, Mission and Message of Cherubim and Seraphim by Elder David Martins.
Dr. David Martins, thank you so much for your time. Such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I also want to give a big shout out to our awesome viewers and listeners for joining us for this interview. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations on the Author Roundup. I'm Ray Walters. Join me next time as we explore the world of supported self publishing, one indie author at a time.